Hi, and welcome to my talk about there's no such thing as agile maturity. And this presentation, this discussion, this came about a lot of years in the agile environment, in an agile environment, in agile spaces, and it's been a lifelong journey. And I think with some of the discoveries that I found, I wanted to share with you and how I came to this conclusion. So when we talk about maturity within organizations, there's a lot of talk about we're mature in agile, we're mature in Scrum, we're mature in development, we're a mature organization. And the basis of that maturity is really from different types of view of maturity from a definition perspective. So if we look at the psychological view, maturity, your mental, physical, emotional, somatic growth and development. When we look at business, there's your chaotic, aware, enabled, manage, and optimize, which is similar to CMMI models or TMMI or CMM. It gives you a set level of where you are from a mature standpoint as an organization, as a team. So you're hitting milestones. You're hitting the steps to get to where you need to go. You have achieved that level based on what your team and your organization is doing. But if we look at a history from Agile, it started roughly in the 1940s, where Kanban was started to be used, and then in the 80s with RUP, iterative model, you have Lean and Scrum in the 80s and 90s. So these frameworks have been around for a while. And when we talk about maturity, and that is mostly people see it as the maturity of doing each of those frameworks. When we look at the manifesto created in 2001, it, it was discussed a better way to create the software, taking all from that previous slide, all the lessons learned and what they can come up with. And they came up with the 4 values and the 12 principles. So when we look at those 12 values and 12 principles, and we try to deal with it as a maturity point of view, what we get is how well did we do something? How well do we do our Scrum ceremonies? How well do we finish our sprints? How well is the team working? And it's that how and what, like with the frameworks, is where people see the maturity. And this is also, if you look at it from a waterfall perspective, when things were being done there, they considered themselves mature because they were able to meet each and every step and get everything that needs to get done within each step to move forward and continue on. What really, if we put this with an agile, all we're really doing is we're mixing agile and waterfall in creating like a hybrid when we talk about maturity. And because of that, what we do is we're really doing agile. Now, if some of you haven't seen the circle on the left or on the right, sorry, is Simon Sinek's golden circle, where in the middle is the why, and the center is the why, the middle is the how, and the outside is the what. When we look at maturity, when we talk about agile maturity, we're looking at the what, which is your frameworks, whether it's safe, less, Kanban, Scrum, even Crystal, if you want to use Crystal. It's what we're doing with the delivery to meet the story, to meet the end goal. So for me, my story really started in Agile about 20 years ago. And over time, I progressed and I had different roles as a developer, as a QA analyst for a good part of my career, manager, senior manager, even to senior executive to a CTO position. And what I found with the agile teams and divisions, departments that I worked in, was that there was still the constant fighting, the feuding between teams, the red tape, and just kind of doing the steps just to get the steps done. And it was about, I would say, about 6, 7 years ago, going through this and understanding, I was with my boys one day and they were talking about Pokemon. And they kept talking about how there's different evolution stages within a Pokemon character and how they grow. And talking with them some more to find out what was different about them was they evolved and they got stronger and they built their strength within new moves, within new functionality, within like new attack and defenses. So to me, I looked at it as like there's got to be something to tie it in, and a light bulb went on, and I found out the why. I found out why we're stuck in agile environments where there's always that constant infighting. And it came to mind that if we look at those at the agile values, the values and the principles, really they are no different than philosophers like Descartes, Kant, uh, and Carl Jung, in that they give the guidance on what to do so you can grow as an individual and interpret that and move forward. It gives you kind of like the guidelines within what to do. So when you look at it in that fashion, and we go back to Simon Sinek's circle, really you're going to the golden circle where you're starting with the why. And when you start with the why and then go to the how and to the what, that is what it means to be agile. Inside the internal, why the teams do what they do, why do they push forward, why they worked well together, and they focus on that, and then that gets you the how and the what. The what is the tools, right? And that's how we have to see frameworks, in that they are a tool in the toolbox to help achieve the end goal, which is why you're doing what you're doing. And we need to move forward. And it helps improve the vision in having that mindset and your collaboration, your effective flow. And it also, in the end, it not only provides value to the client, but it also provides value to the team themselves, which is your improved satisfaction for clients and employees. And it's that there that is really a paradigm shift for how we see and progress in an agile environment, how we progress in a with an agile team. And as you as I'm saying, like I say agile environment, agile team. I'm not saying Scrum team. I'm not saying safe team or train. It's really the teams themselves and how they go. Because when I was a senior executive, even when I was management and teams, there was always that pull and push between this direction and that direction, how we're going to get through things. And in the end, what really happens is when you look at it that way, you are now kind of just looking at the entire forest. You're not seeing the path to get to the end. You're just looking at the trees. And everyone is trying to figure out what is the best way, like to plow through them and not look back and see if there is a easier way to navigate through, say, without cutting down trees, without plowing through a path. And it's that when you look at from a maturity standpoint, that's when you hit those steps, but those steps still create barriers to get to where you need to go. And it helps that when you're being agile and you have the views of it and not structured with not kind of constrained by the steps within the framework, that you'll be able to succeed and get through. And you avoid those inconsistencies across different teams and different departments and divisions. And that inconsistency usually happens as one environment where I worked in, everything was considered Scrum. Any Agile team was considered to use Scrum. And there was difficulties in through it because maybe there was a team or a couple teams that it just wasn't working. Things weren't working right. And it turned into a situation where you had fragmented teams. And even in a matrix environment, most Agile teams are considered matrix, where you have, for software development, you have your developers, you have your QA, you have your product owners, product managers, or BAs, and they work as a team, but they don't work as a team. A best example I can give is if you have played table hockey with the sticks and the men, the cardboard men on the board, really the teams, the individuals, like the forwards, the defensemen, and the goalie, they can only go to a certain point. So that fragmented team where they only stick with what they do and maybe don't branch out, or you have a Venn diagram where you have some overlap, you could still run into problems, and that's not being agile. It's not working as a team. And we can run into areas where maybe like the senior managers, senior leadership, or just the teams in general say, oh, these are the rules of Scrum, so these are what we have to follow down to the letter. We shall not deviate. And recently, the Scrum Guidelines came out instead of more rules and guidelines on how to approach. And it's more the guidance. That's the guidance we need. Or when you look at a mature environment, like when you talk about running processes, is they are focused on just doing those steps. They do those steps and do those steps well. On the other hand, they can consider themselves mature and agile when it's the exact opposite. When you have an environment where it's like, well, we're agile because we do what we do and when we do it, and that can cause a whole bunch of issues on top of that, because it's not about the ad hoc, it's not about the chaos and just doing changes willy-nilly. And you can even have an organization, a set of departments where it's a mix of the both, where you have a very structured, they do the steps left A, B, C, D, and you have another team that they're supposed to work with, and they're completely ad hoc and they're chaotic and they just do what they want. They could still consider themselves agile or mature and agile because they get stuff done either to the letter or they get stuff done fast. And that type of chaos and really structured environments can cause issues where you have a more kind of paired race. If you look at this is, I bring this up, this is what I call my Corvette Chevette paradox, where you have a system of agile delivery or agile management or agile teams, and they have to work together. If they have the wrong tools, it's not going to work well. So in this paradox, imagine, if you will, a car race where you're in pairs of cars as a team, and you both have to finish the finish line at the same time. One can't beat the other. So if you have one that's a Corvette with a lot of horsepower that can get to what they need to do, and one is the Chevette, which is not a lot of horsepower, and two things will happen. One of two things will happen. Either the Chevette is going to burn itself out and fall apart trying to keep up with the Corvette, causing issues, or you're going to not use all the horsepower you could use within the Corvette just so it slows down and keeps pace with the Chevette. So in either of those two scenarios, you're running into a point where you're going to get frustration on both sides. And frustrations from the Chevette team where they're trying to keep up and they're struggling and it's just not working for them, or the Corvette side where it's like, okay, I want to go, but I can't. I can't move. I have to keep at this pace so that we can still get to where we need to get. And sometimes when teams work like that, it kind of creates a bad system. And when you have a bad system, you're going to destroy good people because there's no team growth. Sometimes when I say gaming the system is if you look at story points, you can have a team where senior leadership says you have to do 60 story points per sprint, then the teams might game the tickets coming in, the stories coming in, just to make it 60, and they still don't have to, but they don't have to provide as much value. That's one way that can happen. And overall, whether it's different teams trying to keep up and such, it's going to have a negative impact on the employees. And this is, you see this as from a maturity, because everyone wants to strive to be at a certain level of maturity. And it drives back to when you look at manufacturing and old waterfall of doing things where you do your steps, boom, 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 you get what you need, and you move on to the next, and you move on to the next, and you move on to the next. In an agile environment, we know that it is a more flowing type environment to ensure that things get done. What we see here is back in 2020, there was a study done on the state of Agile. And what they found was 5% out of 2,000 organizations they looked at would be considered Agile from end to end. And if we think about that, that's Agile methodologies and frameworks have been around for almost 80 years, throughout the past 80 years. And in 80 years, the organizations that are in an agile or have done an agile transformation, only 5%. Maybe if there's more numbers coming out, maybe it might be a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but it's not. I think that 5% is close to what it is currently now in the industry, and that is based out of the I think the sticking points on trying to mature. And I think it's just the word, and it's not. There's nothing wrong with the word maturity. There's nothing wrong with the word mature when we are doing the work, when we are doing things to get the job done. But if we're looking at it from an agile perspective, we should more look at it as an evolution, where we have almost as if a living organism, where there are different teams, which is different cells, working together, different organs within the body, working together to survive, to succeed, to get to a level better than what we were the day before. And part of it is we have to ensure that everyone has those common goals, because it's those common goals that help teams drive out how they get there. And ensuring that we have a smoother flow of work, a smoother flow of ideas, a smoother flow of succeedings, of getting to where we need to get. When we look at how most people view maturity, it's not. There is some flow, but there is still some stop gaps and kind of not roadblocks, but more yield signs, right? The flow is still going, but it slows down for a little bit and then it picks back up in the next part. And it slows down and then picks back up in the next part. There's no consistent flow across. And once you have this smoother flow, you can now start really focusing on being strategic. And that's where things really start to progress from an evolution viewpoint, is when we move away from the tactical and become more strategic from the senior leadership and down, and with the guidance and having the goals and ideas as to where we want to get to, then things will start to gel, things will start to flow. And one of the things that can be done to help with that evolution is creating those agile values within a team, within a department, within an organization, and seeing how how these values, how everyone will attract themselves to them. If we look at Google, for instance, if you go to the Google corporate site and look at their values, read their values and think in an agile, kind of like in an agile frame. And even though they don't directly say agile within their values, the values do have an agile twist to them. They do have that view of why they are doing what they're doing. And it builds out into what they develop and what they produce. And it's about the engagement of going in that helps get those agile values. And it's not just the top down, like the senior leadership provides the organization values and it kind of trickles down. Agile values now are like everyone's involved. Everyone gets a piece of that pie so that it's making things better going in. And when you have everyone involved and all the teams involved, and they start seeing those agile values and building those agile values, you can now get better focus on self-managed teams where they can now be in sync with how they get things done. And as we get things done there and we get the self-managed teams and the cells are working together, they're in sync, they now have an opportunity for better continuous improvement. And that continuous improvement, that's your evolution, right? It's not hitting a certain level. You're just continuously evolving as you're progressing in your agile journey. And that continuous improvement and the self-managed teams, that's where you get the stewardship within in creating those values to get the work done. You now have the ideas like, hey, this is what we got to do. Now here are the tools that we have that can do it. And now we're going to use these tools as best as we can to get what we need to get done. All that ties in, as we talked about earlier, employee satisfaction. And we got to ensure that as we organize and work through and get everything sorted and become those self-managed teams, those individual cells, those individual organs within a larger organism, that's what's going to help push things along. That's what's going to help make things better and evolve. That's where your evolution is, because that evolution is going to help through the enabling of the teams to get the job done. No longer, a lot of organizations and a lot of books that they talk about the self-managed teams where the leadership provides the guidance, doesn't give a kind of a command and control. So when we enable the teams to do that and allow them to understand what their goals are and how to get there, what the organization goals are, what their strategic goals are, what they want to see in the end to help their customers, their clients, even within. Now you're going to have everyone in sync to get to that goal, to start reaching to that goal. And when doing that, that's when you start looking at being agile, right? It's about being. It's not about doing. Doing is the framework, your tools, what you use to get to build what you need to build. But using those tools is what will make that product or service much better. It's like you don't build a house with just a hammer. You need more tools than that. So for a lot of different teams that are trying to build a lot of different things, maybe there are different tools out there that can work to help build that faster. While all the while, you still have your agile values and how everyone is in sync to get the work done. We want to be able to lead those teams so that they know where they need to go, so they can have that guidance. It's not kind of one of the things I like saying and doing is leading from behind, right? Like there's people say lead from the front or lead within the team. I like to, my viewpoint with all this is leading from behind. I'm giving them the guidance, I'm giving them the direction, and they are charting their own path to get to where they need to get. Now there will be times where things do have to happen, and maybe there's a little bit of intervention to steer the ship back to where, like, into a rough right direction if it's going in a completely wrong direction. But you're giving the teams, you're working with the teams in that point as well, and they will follow suit. They will understand instead of giving those command and control. And it'll also help building out the right product or service for your clients to meet client needs. One of the things that another speaker out there, Teresa Torres, she talks about product discovery over product development. And it's not just about building features upon features, kind of scattershot around. It's working as a team to find out what the client's needs are and hitting that bullseye right off the bat, getting the right results so that you can now, your clients will have those aha moments, right? So that they will see or they will understand or they will experience the service or the product that will make things so much better for them and give them a little bit of, give them more joy in doing and using those products or services. Also, having the right values and understanding is going to make it easier from an adaptation, right? Markets change, teams change, organizations change. And I've seen in some organizations and teams where, yes, there is a sudden change in strategy. There's a sudden change in direction. The teams did not adapt well to that change. It turned into, a couple of them turned into like about 3 or 4 weeks of kind of stress, firefighting, meetings upon meetings, just to understand what needs to happen. But if we go through this flow and understand how we iterate and how we increment, then adapting becomes almost second nature. Remember, that's one of the values is we accept change, we adapt to change. So why is it that we run into problems where we run into those adapting changes? And to me, it's because the structure of the term maturity. I think just the mindset of maturity is kind of not crippling, but it stiffens the joints up that they don't move as fast. The teams don't adapt as fast. And because of that, they're not as scalable as they can be. If you look at it from an evolution perspective, yes, you can become scalable. And becoming scalable within the teams and organically grow agile values and agile mindsets and agile behaviors within the organization, that's what's going to help move things better along. And that's going to improve the team. That's going to improve success. That's going to have everyone involved in getting the work done and moving forward. Because we have to understand that it is a journey. It's not a destination. If we look at it, maturity, and maturity is it hits a certain level. Agility is about keep going and keep moving and keep going forward. We're not standing still at what we're doing. We're continuously improving at what we do, how we do it, through why we do things. Because we talked about Google, and a lot of organizations, they want to aspire to be like them. Like, oh, Google can deploy once a day or once every 2 days, depending on the department, once a week. They rarely have any problems. We rarely hear anything that goes on with them. So a lot of people want to be like them. But do we really want to do what everyone expects? Do we want to all try to do what Google does, or do we want to do it our way? If you look at it from a philosophy perspective, as mentioned earlier, everyone has different interpretations on what is said. Now, the general goal and general sense is there. Everyone understands. But how they interpret it, no two people would interpret something the same way. Maybe similar, but they'll be a little bit different. So why don't we do it our way? That's how we're going to get there. We don't want to chase others' ideas. We want to have our own ideas. We want to have our own path to get to where we want to get. So as we talked about for the past half hour or so, what did we learn? We learned that traditional mindset runs deep. The maturity view, the maturity term, and the concept runs deep. Now it still works with all organizations, but it's how we merge with the agility behaviors and mindsets to make those different goals, to achieve those levels, while at the same time improving how we get stuff done at the same time. Organizations can mature. They can always mature. They should always mature. Working within, that's how they evolve to achieve that maturity. And we also have to understand that there is no one agile playbook, right? Like each team, each department, each division, each organization has their own playbook to get to where to create that agile environment. And we want to treat it as an organism, right? We want to use the frameworks, our tools. That's how we should see things going forward. Because now when we do that, that's what's going to set yourself apart from everyone else. That's what's going to make things so much simpler and easier to get past. Because we don't want to stick in that 95%. We want to break free. That's what we want to aspire to. And we want to do it by not doing what others do. We want to do what we do, what each team, each department, each organization, how they get there, how they work together. They become those cells that are synergistic to each other and evolve. Again, we go back to my analogy of the human body. We have our heart, we have our lungs, we have multiple organs, our skin, the brain, all that. Each one has their own function, and they're working as efficiently as they can themselves, but they're also in sync with all other parts of the body, all other organs, so that they can be successful, so that they can work and they can get what needs to get done. And when everything is working well and working together, then that's how the body grows and becomes better at what they were than they were the day before. And that's how we have to see this. From a maturity standpoint, it's large chunks in time to achieve something. In agile environments, it's about being better than what we were the day before. So that's not about maturity, that's about evolution. So we want to make sure that we're not the last one behind. We're not the last car behind at the end of the race. Going back to the Chevette Corvette paradox, is we don't want to be that team that either has horsepower on the table that's not being used, or is running themselves rampant just to keep up with everyone else on the other teams. So I'd like to thank you for listening to this. And if you want to carry the conversation or get a hold of me. Here is my email and my website. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy your day.